All right, guys. Our next guest is a legend in both mixed martial arts and pro wrestling. He is a former UFC Superfight champion, Pancrase champion, Intercontinental champion, King of the Ring, and no matter what he's competing in, he is always the world's most dangerous man, Ken Shamrock. Ken, welcome to Submission Radio.
Well, I appreciate you having me.
Yeah, it's great having you on the show. Just something that we want to talk to you about. Let's get this out of the way. Obviously, you're in the security business. It was big news the other day. Beyonce's sister attacking Jay Z as the security guard, stood there idly. Tell us, what are your thoughts here? What exactly went wrong?
Well, like I said, it's hard to say because I'm only getting bits and pieces of it. But from what I saw, there was some mistakes made. But it's like I said, it's hard being in that situation, knowing everything that I saw, but not knowing everything that happened. But he really should have probably not got in the elevator. He should have known that there was a problem happening before they walked into the elevator, and he probably should have gotten whoever his client was away from that situation immediately.
Now, Ken, obviously a lot of people are talking about it. You're a security expert. You work, with the VIPs, the high celebrities. Can you tell us a little bit about that career? There was some rumors that you were working with 50 Cent and other well-known celebrities.
Yeah, I work for a company, Protect, out of Las Vegas, and we get different types of celebrities, very high-end celebrities that are, either have some pretty high risk situations that they need some really good bodyguard work, some good executive client work, and so they usually call me in or call. There's like 3 or 4 guys on our staff that handle those kind of high end clients, and so when we get those calls, we get to come in and we get to work with some of these celebrities who are looking for a little more extra protection.
I was gonna say, Ken, obviously, you're a well-known name. You're one of the pioneers of MMA. Have you ever gone, to do the security detail, to head the security, and all these celebrities were like, "Holy crap, you're Ken Shamrock! I'm a huge fan of yours."
Yeah, that happens. Yeah, definitely it happens, and I think it's probably happened to most of them. But again, like I said, I've done fighting my whole life, and it seemed like I was always the one everybody wanted to protect, and I was the guy that people had bodyguards for, and it was silly to me. I always kept thinking in my mind, why do people bodyguard me? And it never really sat well with me, right? I just thought I was just a regular guy. People love to watch me fight. I never saw the reason for it. And then when I stopped fighting, I thought to myself, you know what? I should be the one doing the bodyguard work. I should be the one protecting these people because, that's what I've done that my whole life is fighting. What better person to protect you is somebody who has made a career out of fighting and being able to learn how to use his body to be able to protect people. So I just switched over and I loved it, man. I really did. And I know a lot of people are asking me, well, why would you want to do that? Isn't that going backwards? And I was like, why would that be going backwards? Because you want to be a service to somebody. I never had that thought process, and I'm never going to. I think it's egotistical, and I think it's selfish. I don't see why anybody, no matter who you are, that can't turn around and help other people.
Well said. And I was going to ask you, with doing security, it's my assumption that, when you've got a bunch of professionals doing their jobs, the situation is usually pretty smooth and, maybe not as crazy as people think. But have you had a time with any celebrities or while you're doing security where, there has been a crazy situation?
Yeah, oh yeah. Like I said, we get hired for the high end clients and things where there's some risk involved. And so we get involved with those things sometimes, and we've had some run-ins where, we've had some people try to walk up and do some things, and we've had to be on our toes to defuse the situation. So, like I said, I didn't get into this to stand around and sit on my hands and serve coffee to people. I got into this because I wanted to get as edgy and living on the edge as possible, and be able to help people while I'm doing it.
Now, Ken, that's amazing. So I think, that's just a new level of respect that all the fans have for you. Going to your MMA career, obviously, I mean, a lot of fans see you as an MMA pioneer. You know, we had Horace Gracie on the show a couple of weeks back, and I think, you know, you and Horace, you're some of the names that people just smile at when they think about. Do you ever look back on your rivalry with Horace and the beginning of the UFC, and do you ever, what do you think when you look at that footage, that initial footage of, you know, MMA when it really kicked off back in the day?
I feel proud, you know, to know that we were a part of something that is that makes so many people happy, and entertains so many people, and that we were a part of making that history. And it's something that will never, I don't care how many times Dana White or the Fertittas try to change the history books or to change things, they'll never be able to take that away, ever.
I would definitely agree. Well, tell us a little bit. I'm sure it's something that you've been asked, you know, a lot of times throughout your career. But what was it like walking into UFC One? You know, not exactly knowing what you expect. What was going through your head?
Well, it was. Well, at first I didn't think it was really going to happen. I mean, only time I ever heard any stuff was pro wrestling when they said no holds barred, and so I was fighting over in Japan, in the organization in Japan, the Pancrase organization, and so I really never even thought this was going to happen. I thought, well, they're going to go, okay, well, this is how it's going to be. We're really not going to do this. So I accepted the invitation they gave me to go and fight. But the whole time I'm thinking to myself, it's not going to happen. So I went to Japan and I defended my title. I knocked out Fouquet with a knee. And 3 days before I was supposed to go to Denver and actually have that first UFC fight. And I flew into Denver 3 days prior to the event, really not believing that it was going to happen the way they say it was going to happen. And so it wasn't until I actually was in the locker room and I watched the first fight where Gerard Godot kicked the sumo in the face and his teeth went flying, did I realize that this was the real deal.
Now, now, Ken, you were a huge part of pro wrestling, and you know we do love pro wrestling here at Submission Radio. I was always wondering, why did you choose to go into pro wrestling? Was it a passion of yours, or did you simply go into it due to the huge popularity of pro wrestling in the 90s?
No, I went into it because I had already done it. I already did it with Jordan Nelson, Roy Nelson, and I'm sorry, Nelson Royal and what was it? Nelson Royal and Gene Anderson in Mooresville, North Carolina. And so I had already been doing it for almost a year and a half. And before I went over to Japan, I started fighting over there. And then, of course, I got in the UFC. And then it started to die out. And then I had an opportunity to go do something else. And I remembered that I'd done pro wrestling and I enjoyed it. I thought it would be a great opportunity for me to be able to go into pro wrestling, still practice my submission moves in pro wrestling, so that if I wanted to go back into MMA after they got all their ducks in a row and started getting the business thing put together, I could go back and still fight. And so I made that move, knowing that I'd already started in pro wrestling. Vince McMahon was going to give me a huge opportunity and move me straight up to the top, and I'd be able to be me, Ken Shamrock, the fighter.
Ken, I was going to ask you, obviously, you did leave pro wrestling a couple of times to go back to MMA. One of those times, obviously, when you had a great position, with the WWF or the WWE now. Do you ever think about whether you should have stayed in pro wrestling a little bit longer, or on the other side of the coin, maybe didn't leave MMA and stayed in MMA a bit longer and take those breaks for pro wrestling?
Well, I couldn't stay in MMA because the reason why I left MMA was because I couldn't support my family. They were getting taken off pay-per-view. The commissioning was always on their butts trying to shut them down. Bob Meyerowitz was having a hard time keeping the shows running. And so I couldn't stay because I couldn't support my family. And to me, that was number one, was being able to take care of my family. And so I had to make a move in order to take care of my family. And luckily for me, I got to be able to go into a business where I could still practice my art. And I did that. So I look back on it, and anybody can look back and say, well, I should have done this and I should have done that. But I look back on it, and I thought I made really good decisions because I could have stayed and it would have flopped. And I would have been struggling my whole life, and I made a good move to be able to get into pro wrestling, and on top of it, where nobody gives me credit for this, was that when I went back to the MMA world, I brought all the fans that noticed me in the WWF, and they were all wondering who I was and where I came from. They all did their background check on me, and then MMA became popular because everybody knew that that's where I came from. Then when I went back into MMA, I brought all those fans back into MMA who weren't watching MMA and blew up the numbers. When me and Tito fought, we blew the numbers up, tripled, quadrupled them compared to what they were making, and nobody, not Fertitas or anybody, wanted to give me any credit whatsoever for helping keep the UFC where it's at today.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, you hear a lot of times people and fans talking about how when you did come back, that is another part of what saved MMA and the UFC. Not only, you know, the Forrest and Bonner fight and things like that, but you mentioned MMA pay and how you couldn't support your family. And you know, obviously we're further down the track with MMA. The sport's evolved, but I think a lot of people are still struggling as far as MMA pay goes. You know, still not comparing to boxing. It's still a young sport, though. Do you think that soon we might see MMA pay rise to the level of other athletes like boxing and basketball?
No, because they won't, because they don't have to. And you know, it's sad because even when people look at it and they go, well, that guy made $1 million. It's like, do you realize that this guy that made $1 million has put his whole life into this thing, and drew enough for the UFC to bring in $120 million, and they gave him $1 million for people coming to watch him fight him. And the UFC, the people in the UFC don't have to worry about a time frame that their bodies are going to hold out long enough to be able to keep fighting. They get to keep going on and making money and not worrying about injuries. These guys are in it for 3 to 5 years. 5 years if they're lucky, but 3 years max for most of these guys. And they got to make that money now. And to not pay them what the money that they deserve to get paid, it to me is absolutely a sin.
Now, Ken, I got an interesting question for you. Obviously, you worked with Vince McMahon, you've done a WrestleMania before, and you've worked with Dana White. Out of those two, who do you think gives a fairer paycheck in terms of the work that you put in their company?
For me, I don't know what other people say, but for me, it's definitely Vince. I felt like he did me right. Even though I don't know what the issues are with me and him now, because I've never did anybody ever talk to me or say anything. But for me personally, I thought he treated me very fairly. He paid me well, and I thought he gave me a great opportunity to be able to keep competing in the W. Of course, I had to do my job. I had to do what they needed me to do, or otherwise he wouldn't give me the time of day. I understand that. I understood that. But when I did do what I was supposed to do, he paid me what I deserved.
Now, let me ask you, because as fans of both sports, this one's always intrigued us, and I think a lot of people as well. As far as the schedule and the lifestyle of an MMA fighter versus a pro wrestler, because MMA fighters, you know, it is real fighting. Pro wrestling, you've got a crazy schedule over the whole year. Which one do you think has the harder lifestyle and schedule?
Oh, WW, yeah, the WW. That's definitely not, without a shadow of a doubt. That's the hardest program.
Now, Ken, obviously, there was a big WrestleMania 30 recently, and a lot of people were shocked about, Undertaker's streak finishing and Brock Lesnar beating him. We just wanted to get your thoughts. What are your thoughts on the product these days? Do you ever watch it still? Would you ever, want to you're 50 years old, but you're in great shape. Would you ever consider coming back in a Legends-type contract deal with the WWE, doing a few appearances? What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I would, like I said, I've already voiced my opinion that it would be nice to be able to come back there and get a run at the title, one that I don't think I really got an opportunity to really get an honest run at it. So yeah, I've always made that statement. It'd be nice to be able to go back and give it one more shot. But again, like I said, it's not in my corner, and I don't make those calls. So, it's up to somebody else to do that. So all I can do is just voice my opinion and say, yeah, it'd be great to do it. But somebody else has to make that decision.
Well, I think a lot of it comes down to fans as well. I mean, as someone who's always been buying, the WWE games year after year. I mean, you were a legend in, I think, the 2013 one with the Attitude Era, so it was good to see you there. But yeah, I think a lot of fans, they're still sort of, you resonate with them. Is there anything on the cards as far as being inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame? Have you heard anything about this or anything like that?
No, no. I haven't heard anything. That's the whole thing. Is it's just like tried to put my, reach out and try to contact some different people, but basically there's been not a sign or a peep back. So I have no idea, absolutely none whatsoever, what the issues or problems are. I didn't know there was any until nobody would talk to me.
Yeah, I think it is a bit strange. I think a lot of fans, and let me get your opinion. Do you find it a bit disrespectful that in the WWE Hall of Fame, you've got greats like Andre the Giant, Jesse the Body, Billy Graham, Hogan, Bret Hart, Ric Flair, Stone Cold, and more. But then you also have guys like Drew Carey and Donald Trump just because of their celebrity status. And yet you were part of the Attitude Era. You're part of WrestleMania 13 and one of the most important matches of all time. And yet you haven't been inducted. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, not even WrestleMania 13, where it was one of the bigger ones that changed which really changed it into the Attitude Era. But with me being the referee, coming from where I came from, and then you look at pro wrestling prior to Ken Shamrock and after Ken Shamrock, and you look to see that there's probably 100 more submission holds in the WWE because of me entering into the world of pro wrestling to bring in those submissions so people could look at them and legitimize them for pro wrestling. You look at it before I was there and after I was there. It's different matches.
Now, Ken, I always wanted to ask you this question personally. I was always a WCW fan. Have you ever come close during that popularity time, 97, 98, 99, to going over to WCW for a little bit and wrestling there?
No. No, like I said, I was sold with the WWF. I thought that they gave me a great opportunity. I was very happy with them. They paid me well, and I was happy. Problem is that when things start happening and you're away from your family all the time, and it wore on you, and so I needed to be back home. It was wearing on me. The road was killing me. I wasn't the same person, so I needed a break. So I appreciate everything that they did for me and all the opportunity they gave me. And so, yeah, no, I wouldn't. Not while I was on the contract. I would have never gone anywhere else.
Now, also, Ken, you mentioned, coming into the WWE and pro wrestling to get all those submissions in. Now, there's another guy that's sort of, I guess, similar in his own ways, and that's Daniel Bryan. You work with him in Ring of Honor. What are your thoughts on his WWE success? He's very much into grappling and BJJ, and not only that, but do you think he'd make a good MMA fighter?
Well, I mean, again, like I said, I think that with anybody, there's an opportunity, you take it. But how that opportunity comes out, it depends on every individual. I can look at somebody and say, "Wow, this guy's got all the talent in the world," and man, he's got every ability to be the world's best, and go in and just fall on his face. So, I mean, I can look at Daniel Bryan and say, "Yeah, I think he's got potential. I think he could do well," but it's getting into the ring and doing it. That's the key. Can you do that? That's it. So you can't give anybody any credit until they do it.
Ken, I was going to say, obviously, the future of the WWE is with Triple H at the moment. It looks like he is slowly taking over the company. It looks like he will be controlling the company in the future one day. What are your thoughts on Triple H? And do you think that when he does take over the company completely, it will be good for the sport of pro wrestling, or do you think that it could be a problem?
Well, I think we're seeing it now. And I'm not saying to be mean or hurtful or anything. I'm just, if people want my opinion, I'm going to give it to them, and I'm not going to, sugarcoat it. I'm just going to tell them the truth. But if it keeps going the way it's going, I don't see WWF being a powerhouse anymore. I see it falling. I see it crumbling down, and the only thing that people are going to be interested in is the history footage, because I see it now. I see it's struggling now. Even though you're starting to see little things here and there, but it's just to be able to consistently do what Vince McMahon did. I'm just not sure we're ever going to see that again.
Oh yeah, Ken, we wanted to ask you something. You know, as big fans, there's a lot of crazy stories. You know, in pro wrestling, wrestling's got obviously its share of traditions and customs and laws. You got wrestlers' court, things like that. What was one of the more interesting backstage incidents that happened at a WWE show that you remember?
Well, I tell you, the biggest one to me was when Owen, when he fell. I mean, we were standing backstage, and I was in a grill station, and I watched it happen. And for the longest time, we stood there and just stared at the monitor, waiting for some gimmick to pop up, or for the match to start, or for him to pop up. And then when he was wheeled back in the gurney, still we were waiting for him to get up. I mean, we just didn't believe that it was real, because all the gimmicks and stuff that go on there, and you're never told what's happening, and they'll play it all the way out till the next week. And so for the longest time, I think the fans were the same way, was that no one really truly understood what was happening at that moment, and how real it was. And for us, I mean, even though there was a meeting about whether we were going to go on and do the show, we were going to keep doing it, out of his honor we're going to do it, in the back of everybody's mind, we were all thinking we were getting worked. Like, this is a work. Somebody's working us. And so I'm not sure anybody really grasped that until probably after a few weeks afterwards, where it set in the funeral and in the news, and it really set in that it was real. But you imagine that, not really knowing something like that, because the company and everything that you do there is all subject to entertainment.
Yeah, wow, yeah, and it was definitely one of the more tragic moments in sports and entertainment, and yeah, that would have been brutal to be a part of. So definitely a different experience. Now, going back to MMA, Can, obviously, performance-enhancing drugs in the sport have been a problem. They've recently banned TRT. What are your thoughts on the whole performing-enhancing drug problem in MMA? Do you think it's getting better, or do you think it can be stopped?
Well, first of all, I think that when people talk about banning these substances, it's funny because I don't think people really realize what they're asking or what they're saying. Is if they take these things out of sports, people are going to be backed up 20 years as far as competitiveness. What people used to see in colleges that are now like pro now, and professionals like they're supermen, the level of play will be dropped significantly in fighting, in football, in basketball, and everything that we're used to seeing. The athleticism and the strength and the stuff these guys are doing will be dropped significantly, and the entertainment value will drop with it. And and I don't even really think people are realizing what they're asking for. Is they're asking for the entertainment, the value of the entertainment to drop significantly, and we're going to be okay with that. Considering what we're used to seeing, it's just not going to be the same. And I think people say, oh, it'll still be good, it'll be this. I just don't really believe they understand what it is that they're really asking for. And I believe, personally, that these things were made to help people in their health. And I believe that there's a safe level for people to take these kind of things to help their body recover, to be a safe athlete, and be able to get in the ring and compete on a safe level, and then be able to have their bodies recover enough for them to be normal throughout the week, rather than have these guys afraid of getting caught, so they won't go to a doctor, so they won't get it legally. They go in the black market, they get it because they can't let anybody know they got it, because then they can lose the ability to fight or their pro card or whatever it is that they're doing. They'll get caught, the media will find out, they'll get banned, they'll get fined, all these things happen, so they'll go on the black market and get it. And that's where the problem is that they're getting stuff, they don't know what they're doing, they don't have doctors in their care to help them do it the proper way, so they're not putting their health at risk. And so that's the issue right there. I think that they can somehow find a safe level, make these guys all make sure they got their own doctors to put them, if they're going to go on it, to have their own doctors put them on it, and make sure the doctors are giving physicals every month, once a month, keeping them at a safe level I think that's how you fix the problem. It's crazy to think people go, oh well, we're gonna stop it now. Now that it's going on for 50 years, we're just gonna completely ban it now, because I promise you this, and I'm not sure. I'll bet you people who understand how many people are using it in sports, they know how badly the athletic level will drop. It'll be so bad that people won't want to turn on the TV anymore because they're not going to be able to see what they're used to seeing.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely interesting. I was going to ask you, obviously, the UFC and Nevada and all these state athletic commissions, they were copping a lot of flack for this. Do you think they basically caved to? Do you think they basically banned them to help everybody's well-being, or do you think they caved more to the public pressure?
Well, I just think they did it because they want to try and get on people's good sides. And the funny thing is too, is like, it's the fans don't even really know what they're saying. I mean, I understand that they want to make everybody safe, and I love them for that. But the reality of it is the reason why it's unsafe is because they can't go to a doctor, because they'll get banned. Now, if they make these things for people that are sick and losing weight, and it's good for them, it helps people put on muscle and to recover from a sickness. Imagine what it'll do when you get a guy in there that's training for 5 years and his body's tore down, and he's able to go in and actually help his body recover like a racing car putting high octane fuel in it, because it has to go so fast all the time, and it's always getting these fresh parts put in there, high performance parts put in these vehicles, so that they're able to sustain the pressure these cars put on their engines year round. The body is the same way, where these guys are putting so much pressure on their bodies that they need things to help them be able to recover and sustain the punishment they're putting on their bodies. And if you do it at a safe level, and most doctors, any honest doctor will tell you, if you put them under a doctor's care and they're under a doctor's care and they're at a safe level, it won't hurt you.
And Ken, you mentioned that it will change what the sport looks like. It won't be as entertaining. And, you bring up some really interesting points that a lot of people haven't before. What I was going to ask you is, in the 90s, how many people do you think were on performance-enhancing substances? And, obviously it was a very entertaining time in MMA. Do you think it's one of the reasons that was so entertaining?
Well, of course it was. I mean, yeah, and again, like I said, it's hard to say how many people are on, but I think you look across the board, and you look at, and the funny thing is that when you look at some of these guys, fans will go, well, he's not using, and it's like, listen, I'm in there, I'm in the locker room, and I know what guys are doing. And it's funny when I hear them say that, because it just makes me laugh. Just because they don't have abs, and they don't have big old biceps, and they don't have the form of a bodybuilder, doesn't mean that they're not using. I promise you that. These guys, most of them, are all trying to improve themselves to be a world champion. And I'm not saying all of them, because I don't know if all of them are doing it. But I'm saying there's a significant amount of them that are doing it.
Now, Ken, as far as a lot of MMA legends and pioneers, it seems that these days a lot of them are uniting. Now, you recently mended the bridge with your brother Frank, who is another MMA and pancrase legend. What was it like to be on the same page after so many years of not seeing eye to eye, and how exactly did it come about that you two mended the bridge?
Well, I mean, my brother came out with that documentary, Blood Brothers, Bound by Blood, and so it was an opportunity for us to get together and really talk about things. And I was happy. I was happy the way it came out. It seemed like he was trying to make an effort to try and make things right, and so I opened my arms. That's all I ever wanted, was for him to make an honest effort to fix what he broke. I mean, I didn't break it. I didn't do those things. He did. And I'm not saying I wasn't at fault at all, because I was. I know I was. But I wasn't the one that walked out and left, and I wasn't the one that didn't go to my dad's funeral. I wasn't the one that was there when he was sick. I didn't do those things. And so I embraced him when he did that. I was happy, because I think it's something he's going to need to have clarification on sooner or later, and I'm glad he did it. So I was glad to be able to be a part of that, and actually now move forward with him and put that behind us. because, like I said, we've been through a lot together. We've done a lot of things together, and it'd be a shame for us not to be able to enjoy them.
I think, any person, whether you're a fighter or just a regular guy, who makes coffee or whatever the case is, it's always good when you've been with, through a lot of things with someone, you can, mend that bridge. Obviously, another person that you've had a tumultuous relationship with is Dana White, but as proved with your relationship with your brother, time heals all wounds. Do you ever see yourself and Dana White be on good terms again?
I would hope so. A lifetime's a long time to go, be hating somebody or being angry at somebody. And I like I said, I may have spoke out at times and been angry at times, just as he has been. But lately, all I'm doing is just trying to make sure that we don't ruin the sport, that we don't, these fighters that are coming in there and putting their bodies on the line and that are basically risking it all to be a professional fighter, and then they get to that level where they've all dreamed to get to, and then they walk away with not necessarily empty pockets, but empty pockets when it comes to the amount of money they're getting paid as opposed to what they're making off of these guys. It's not fair, and it doesn't matter whether I like Dana or I don't like Dana, because it's irrelevant. It's wrong.
And I think, when it comes to business, personal feelings, sometimes they don't really matter. Sometimes it's about, doing the right thing. Obviously, with your brother, it was a family situation, and certain things had to happen, to mend that bridge. With Dana White, and I feel like a car salesman almost, like, what would have to happen in order for you guys to get back on the same page?
Well, I personally, I think it would have to be Dana to want to open up, to want to, explore, putting it behind us. But what he'll have to realize is that I still are going to speak out against fighter pay and fighter treatment. It's not necessarily directed just at him, but it's directed at the organization. And obviously, he's one of the heads of the organization. But there's no reason for him to hate me or to call me names or to try and change the history books, do all those things because someone's trying to speak out for something that's right. And if I'm not right, by all means, prove me wrong.
Ken, there's been a lot of stories about that you guys had an alleged fight over you wanting to be involved with the IFL a while back, and you were supposed to fight Bisping. Can you elaborate a little bit about that? Was that the reason why your contract with the UFC didn't work out in the end?
It was a while back. I can't even get into the details on there. I don't really know. I know it was a lot of things that happened that just didn't make sense. It was stupid. But again, it was because of, probably because Dana was mad because I said something and then I spoke out against, fighter pay, fighter treatment. I don't know. It was a while back, but I know it was pretty sickening and stupid the way it happened.
Yeah, absolutely, Ken. And, we had Randy Couture on the show a few shows back, and, he said a very similar thing to you, and both of you obviously really do care about the sport. My question to you is, would you ever consider being a part of creating an MMA union for these fighters? Obviously, you know so much. It really seems like you care about the sport and care about the fighters. Is that something that you could see yourself doing one day?
Oh, absolutely. No doubt. We've explored them options, and and everything's when the time is right, I think those things will come about. But again, like I said, there's a lot of things that have to happen in order for those things to be able to start moving forward. And I think that the more that the UFC and the way that the UFC's doing their business, the more and more they're pushing. The more and more they're going to push that union to flourish.
Now, Ken, I wanted to ask you, because the UFC in general, they really are evolving as a company. MMA is evolving. I wanted to ask you, when obviously when you were winning fights in the UFC, one thing that people never expected, and that was women in the octagon. Now I've got Ronda Rousey and things like that. What are your thoughts on women's MMA?
I've always been pro. You can go all the way back to when I was interviewed when Dana White said there'll never be any women fighting in UFC, not as long as he's there. And you can go all the way back to that, and I've always been pro women for MMA. I've always thought it was a great thing. I think women are exciting. They're great to watch. I mean, you watch them in boxing. That's what I actually compared it to when I was asked. And I said, well, you look at boxing. I said, some of the best fights in the card are the women. So why not MMA? And then Dana at the time was saying women will never fight in the UFC. But you ask him about it, and so I never said that. People can pull up the quote. Well, he didn't say that.
He certainly does say a lot of stuff that he takes back later on. I was going to ask, just on the whole fighter pay area, obviously the UFC want to introduce uniforms into the company, and a lot of fighters are worried about it because it may restrict their possibility in making money from sponsors. What are your thoughts on UFC creating a uniform for the sport?
Well, first of all, they're already taking percentages of the sponsorship monies that will come in from anybody, and then they have to accept those sponsorship monies, so it has to be enough money for UFC to make anything, and so the fighters are really been limited on how much money they can even make for their sponsorships, and then now they're basically it's going to be nil. I mean, they're going to put uniforms on, and the UFC is going to have big major sponsors on these uniforms, and they're going to get all of that money, and the fighters are going to get zero.
Now, Ken, basically, when we announced that you were going to be on the show, we also opened up the opportunity for fans to ask you questions. And suffice it to say, when we opened the floodgates, the response we got was by far bigger than any previous guest we've had. So if it's okay with you, we'd like to ask you a few questions from the fans.
Sure.
Now, Alan Partridge, I think this one's a bit hopeful. Ken, are you officially retired?
Oh, no. I'll never retire. I'll never fight again, but I'll never retire.
King of Fists wants to know, Ken, besides yourself, who's the greatest of all time out of Fedor, Anderson, GSP, or another name that might be in your head?
Well, I'll tell you, I'm going to have to go with Rickson Gracie. I think Rickson was probably the best of all.
And I think yeah, he probably doesn't get as mentioned as much as he should. Alex88, what are your favorite leg lock setups from the top and the bottom?
Say that again.
What are your favorite leg lock setups from the top and from the bottom?
Well, when someone's mounting me on the top, I love to bump them, get a knee inside, and then sweep the legs around for a heel hook. When the guy's mounting me, bump him up, knee inside, throw a leg over, and heel hook him. When I'm on top, it's simple, man. I love to split and sit, and then I look for whatever they give me.
Bad guy 4523. His question is: in your prime, you had some of the best takedowns and takedown defense in the game. And he says that I know in the first fight with Tito, you had a blown out ACL, and in the second and third fight, you could not underhook to prevent his takedowns due to a shoulder injury. Would you have been able to prevent Tito from taking you down if not for these injuries? And would you have been able to take Tito down yourself?
Well, I think if you look at my track record, I went against a guy named Dwayne Kozlowski, who was a Greco-Roman world-class medalist in the Olympics, and I destroyed him. I went against Dan Severn, who was a world-class wrestler. I was able to stop his takedown several times and choke him out. And so if you look at my record across dealing with guys that were in that world-class level of boxing and also wrestling, I was able to dominate them. They couldn't get me to the ground, and I was able to get them to the ground. And you look at Tito's level of wrestling. Great wrestler he really was, but he didn't make it into that college level. So if I was going to compare me at that, that's how I would compare it. And if you compare it like that, I would say absolutely yes. There's no question I would have been a different fighter, and it would have been a much different it would have been a lot more difficult for him to be able to try and take me down. And then with my submissions, being able to counter that takedown into a submission would have really been dangerous for him.
Now, speaking of Tito, the Scorpion wanted to ask, with Tito, is there any bad blood left, or is the beef squashed completely?
I don't have any bad blood. It was mostly just carried on because I think that it went past the ring, and it should have never gone that far. We were there to do a job. We were there to fight each other. I got prepared the way I got prepared. he got prepared the way he got prepared, and it should have ended there. It should have gone outside the ring. We let it go outside the ring. That was our bad. But I'm over it. I want to look to the future, and I want to try and help build MMA, and I want to try and make sure and help get the fighters the pay that they deserve and the treatment they deserve. And the only way we could do that is for guys like myself, Tito Ortiz, Rampage Jackson, my brother Frank, obviously, Randy Couture, all these guys. I can go on and on and be listed guys that can actually help us, George St. Pierre, all these guys who can help us make sure that the UFC doesn't go into a direction that boxing did, and then we end up losing this thing that we have been so hard trying to build over the years, and just have it go away because of the way you're paying and treating fighters.
Absolutely, Ken. And Tito is gonna fight in the weekend. Just on the side note, what do you think about him coming back into MMA and fighting in Bellator? Do you think that was a wise move from Tito's part?
I think that anybody who was given so much to the sport deserves the right and the opportunity to go out the way he wants to go out. I don't think anybody has the right to tell him or anybody else that they're done. That's just not fair. It's not fair. He's given too much to the sport. He's done things for other people. He's helped build the sport. He's been one of the greatest light heavyweight champions ever. And then to tell him he's got to quit, like he doesn't know better, that's not fair.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. Bruce Lee on TRT, he doesn't have a question. He just wanted to thank you and Randleman, and says that you are the guys that got him into watching MMA. Strychnine also wanted to ask you, just basically say thank you for your career and that you are a legend. Now, Gina Cup wanted to ask you, after all these great fights over the years, what's your physical condition like, and what's your training schedule like these days? Do you still train?
Well, my physical conditioning is I see a doctor once a month for checkups, just because I've gotten so many surgeries. They just want to make sure that I'm doing a checkup and everything's working right. But I've got brackets in my neck from 3 through 7. I got metal brackets in my neck. My lower back, the first 5 brackets in my lower back, I've got metal brackets in my lower back, the first 5. And then in my shoulder, I got a titanium ball in my right shoulder, and I got a titanium screw ACL replacement in my left knee. And so I've had pretty severe injuries. But with surgeries and stuff and the checkups that I get once a month, I've been very blessed to be able to move around and still be able to train, work out, not like I used to, but at least just keep my physical fitness and my shape, and be able to do bodyguard work, executive client work, and be able to still play sports. So I've been blessed in that sense. So my life's really good. I've got my grandkids and my kids. I get to spend time with them. I get to go and do sports with them. So yeah, things are good with me, and I'm real happy. And but my physical, after all those things I told you about, I feel good. So yeah, thank you for asking.
Wow, and it's great to see that you're in such a good place. Now, Fader43 wants to know what your favorite MMA fight of all time is, excluding your fights.
Excluding mine?
Yeah.
Oh, wow! There's so many great ones. I would have to say most recently, Chael Sonnen and Silva, or the armbar in like the last minute there. I thought that was amazing, tremendous to take that kind of beating for that many rounds and still be able to pull off that armbar. Physically, if you watch that match, that was like the American hockey team, the Miracle on Ice. They had no chance, where the Russians beat them 12-0 2 months prior to that, right? They had no chance. And that's just like watching that fight. When you watch the Silva, you just looked at it, he had no chance. None. And he did it. So that was pretty amazing.
And just on the side note, with Anderson Silva, obviously he had such a big injury with his leg. Do you think he can return and fight at the same level that he fought at before? Or do you think this is more of a thing where the UFC wants him to return because obviously he's such a huge draw and they just want to get him in there as soon as possible?
Well, I think he's a draw, but I think they also want to make sure that they beat him. Like they beat him soundly and he's done. He's over. I know they did it with the one guy, but the second time around he got hurt. So they just want they want a final answer and a final note to the end of him, that he got beat soundly and it's over.
Mm. Now, Ken, we're going to move on to the tap out round in just a moment, but I just wanted to get one more fan question in there because there's a lot of questions from these fans. We've got one more. Grinder Man just basically wanted to say that your fight with Don Frye is one of his favorite fights in MMA ever. But the question is from Shino, and it is out of the current big name stars in MMA, who do you think embodies the old school fighting spirit of early MMA the most?
I didn't get that. Say that.
Out of all the current big name stars of MMA, who do you think embodies the old school fighting spirit of early MMA the most?
Wow. I don't know. I don't know, because it's hard, because everybody's the same today. It's like there's really no, and they're all good. I mean, they're all got really good talent, but it just seems like they're all the same. There's really nobody that stands out.
There you go, guys. Now, Ken, we're going to be doing this thing. It's called the tap out round. It's like a word association. We're going to throw some fun questions at you, and you just tell us what the first thing is that comes to your mind. Okay? Are you ready?
Yep.
Okay. Greatest pro wrestler that you've ever worked with?
The Rock.
Okay. What does Ken Shamrock do for fun?
Golf.
If you could rematch one person in your MMA career, who would it be?
Tito.
The strongest opponent you've ever faced?
Masakatsu Tsunaki.
Did you enjoy being a coach on The Ultimate Fighter?
No.
Best memory from Japan?
World champion. Pancras world champion.
Does 50 Cent do any MMA, and did you teach him any moves or have a role with him?
Yes, absolutely. I think he'd be good.
Now, the famous living death quote, how did this come about? Was it something that you thought of beforehand, like cutting a promo, or was it just heat of the moment?
What do you say?
The living death quote, when you and Tito were doing the press conference, was it something you practiced before, like cutting a promo, or was it just heat of the moment?
No, I just said it. Just thought of it and did it.
Was Steve Blackman a legitimate badass?
Yes.
Now, apparently, Undertaker has a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and has always been a fan of MMA. Is this true?
Yes.
What were your thoughts on the only shoot event the WWE did? It was called Brawl for All, and do you wish you were part of it?
No.
Out of all your amazing achievements, which one do you think is the greatest?
I would have to say first UFC champion, super fight champion.
Well, there you guys go. An amazing man. You know, such a pleasure to have you on the show, Ken. You know, all your Australian fans and fans from around the world listening to this interview, I think they really, really appreciate your time. Such honest answers, you know, such a great man, such a great career. And, you know, it's been such a pleasure having you on the show.
Well, I appreciate you having me, and God bless to everybody. And don't forget to follow me. It's Shamrock Ken. Shamrock Ken, at Shamrock Ken on Twitter.
Don't worry, we didn't forget. We were building up to it. But yeah, guys, definitely check out Ken Shamrock, at Shamrock Ken. We will be sending out the links, and we'll be putting it up on this website. Ken, just want to thank you again. It was an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on Submission Radio.
All right, thanks, guys. God bless.